On my way down to the bayous of Louisiana, I look out at the hazy atmosphere, the long fields, and much longer swamps that threaten to engulf my character, whom I've only just met. As we approach our destination, we are locked out and must go around the back in our search to find his missing wife. This is Ethan's quest in Resident Evil 7, and the first hour of it is magical and terrifying at the same time, bringing me back to the feelings of playing Hideo Kojima's Eluding Promise, PT. That's not the only magic going on here. My use of we isn't accidental. In Resident Evil 7, I feel as if I'm Ethan, and Ethan's quest feels like my own. The usual joy of video games is their interactivity, that we can find ourselves immersed in worlds in ways we can't be with movies or books. We not only feel like we are in those worlds, but that we can actively shape them as well. This feeling of responsibility is often tailored towards power fantasies, such as in superhero games, racing games, or shooters. But with horror games, that feeling of empowerment becomes disempowering instead. All of a sudden, you aren't as heavily equipped as Master Chief or the Doomslayer. In most cases, you're a human being, scared, alone, and needing to use your wits and surroundings to outmatch the obstacles in your way. Whether that's monsters, ghouls, monstrous and metaphoric reflections of your character, or, in some less prestigious titles, the game itself. But Resident Evil 7 isn't such a title. Its prestige is worn throughout its nearly 10-hour runtime from the sheen and sleek graphics, the responsive and impactful weapons, the interesting narrative mystery built up within the first few hours of the game, and the overall sense of dread. That dread is especially pronounced in the first hour, which is aided by a prolonged game of cat and mouse between Ethan and the Baker family. The Bakers are a group of Southerners who are living on the edge of society. Their house is in disrepair, the mold is coming out of the walls, and, as you begin to discover, cases of missing persons are rampant in the area. This all culminates in a claustrophobic, horrifying scenario where you are constantly being chased by a family of killers that cannot be reasoned with and want to hurt you. Meanwhile, your armaments to fight back are limited in the beginning, to say the least. You get a pocket knife early on and build yourself up as you go along, but the first half of the game you constantly feel as if you're just getting by. Thanks to Resident Evil's classic adaptive difficulty, you never feel like there's no hope, just that, at worst, there isn't a lot of hope for you surviving. This sense of near hopelessness begins the euphoric cycle of violence, needing help, finding help, and then launching counterattacks on the Bakers. This cycle fuels much of the game until you eventually become a full-time arsenal yourself, but for as long as you aren't, the horror remains. Why? And what does this teach us about horror games more broadly? Horror Goliaths such as Amnesia and Outlast feel cut from the same cloth as Resident Evil 7, with its use of cat and mouse mechanics, most likely because Resident Evil 7 liberally copied from these games. As Ethan and others, you are constantly on the run, put in situations where you are lacking the tools to effectively deal with the enemies and monsters around you, which heightens the tension. Early on in Resident Evil 7, the most terrifying moment was Ethan trying to get through to a cellar door that leads to a tunnel under the house. As I had never played before, I thought I could simply lift the latch and open it. Alas, it required a key I had not seen nor found, leading me to scream, "I can't get through! I thought I could get through!" My terror was at once all-consuming. I was fearful that one of the Bakers was right behind me, about to get in my face and kill me. The horror came from feeling like I was Ethan, and that I had the power to escape, but also to be killed. And therein lies the crucial difference between video games and movies. In movies, you know there's nothing you can do for the teenagers who will soon meet their maker. But in video games, you have near total control over the situation. While some may see this as empowering, others see this as a huge burden and one that instills fear into their gaming sessions. The sense of responsibility means that you have to move and be an active participant. You can't just watch as that teenager you swear has a personality is chopped up in front of your eyes. You have to run away, but only as fast as the game will let you, which meshes your sense of responsibility with the limitations of the gaming world in an amalgamation more terrifying than the Rat King. Especially because, in Resident Evil 7, your run is at best the kind of fast walk you might take on the way home on a rainy night. Not the kind of movement you'd expect to see from a man who's on the run from a murderous and carnivorous family. This makes you feel the pressure of the cat and mouse dynamic to an alarming extent. A weird space between the real world and the digital world opens up then, one in which you feel a responsibility to move so you don't die, but also where that movement is dictated by others and not your own body. It can lead to a treadmill effect where you can feel as if you're not getting anywhere, and yet the enemies behind you are on rollerblades. Again, the power fantasy concept held within many video games is held back, and you become the marionette, not the puppet master. And due to the inherently unstable history of the horror genre and how endings have often been changed and swapped out per the audience's demand, even once the main mystery of the game is solved, the ending isn't. How everything resolves remains its own set of problems and horrors to overcome, either through the cutscenes or, as in the game Until Dawn, your choices. But in Resident Evil 7, your choices are largely predetermined. Sure, You can go into one room before another, and once you get a certain key, you can choose to access those doors or not. But the big fights of the game are largely predetermined, as is the ending, leaving you with at least a little more wiggle room and worrying how things will end for Ethan. As Jack, the head of the Baker family, grabs Ethan, he comes up and says he wants to show him something wonderful, before blowing a part of his own head off. This moment captures and crystallizes what makes horror so terrifying in video games. There's all the regular fear of the movies, where you're paralyzed with the inability to act, but in the case of a video game, you're also living with the knowledge that you will be able to do something as soon as the cutscene is over. And if you're not careful, you'll be dying with that knowledge too. Alright, here's my best imitation of the Resident Evil guy, okay? Here it is. Resident Evil 7. What do you think? Pretty good, huh? I do birthday parties. Thank you.